Hi, I'm Dr. Kevin Mailo, one of the co-hosts of the Physician Empowerment Podcast. At Physician Empowerment, we're dedicated to improving the lives of Canadian physicians personally, professionally, and financially. If you're loving what you're listening to, let us know. We always want to hear your feedback. Connect with us. If you want to go further, we've got outstanding programming both in person and online. So look us up. But regardless, we hope you really enjoy this episode. Hi, I'm Dr. Kevin Mailo, one of the co-hosts of the Physician Empowerment Podcast. And I have today with me our guest on the pod, Christian Wigmore. And I'm not introducing him yet as Dr. Christian Wigmore because Christian is a medical student at UBC. And he founded a very interesting venture called Budget Your MD. And I wanted to share it because Christian connected with me over social media. We got talking. We had one of those great phone calls that I think was supposed to be probably 5 or 10 minutes. And it wound up being like an hour or two, talking life, talking dreams, talking finance, talking career. And then, of course, Christian joined us at our conference in 2023. And it was amazing to meet him in person. And we stayed in touch ever since. So I'm very glad to have you here, Christian. I love your passion. I love what you're trying to do for your fellow learners. But I think there's a lot of wisdom here for us going through our careers. Like, I'm a mid-career physician and I love your message. So tell us a little bit about like your background. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing before medical school.
Cool.
And then what you did, once you entered medical school.
Okay. Well, first off, super, super glad to be here. I can think back to when I messaged you first on, I think it was LinkedIn. And I think I might have messaged like 6 or 7 other people, no answers, but you answered me right away. And then we get on that phone call. And then off we go to the conference in May. It's been cool to get to know you. So yeah, super glad to be here. So yeah, my name's Christian. I am a 4th-year medical student at UBC. My journey has been pretty centered around medicine to start. I knew kind of in high school I wanted to do medicine. You go to university, you do the sciences. But funny enough, like if you are a UBC grad or you know how UBC medical school works, you get to drop your worst year. And I met my wife in 2nd year and got like the worst grades.
Was it worth it?
Oh, well, I'm still married to her. You're right. So I got the worst grades that year. And I knew I needed to have a little bit extra time before that bad year can be dropped before getting into medical school. So I was like, what am I going to do? I grad with a science degree. That's going to leave me doing what? I know I don't really have an interest in something outside of medicine with a science degree. So why not start taking some business courses, right? So I started doing business courses and I realized, wow, I kind of like this stuff. And, that wheel starts turning and I realized, okay, maybe if I start doing summer courses and push a little harder, I can grad with a science and a business degree. And so that ended up taking me 5 years. And after that, I found a small little internship in the midst of COVID with a financial advisor and kind of was able to be his associate and just watch the way he ran his business. And it wasn't only finance, but it was kind of more of like the operations side and entrepreneurship that really started to make me realize that there's that world out there. Like they don't teach you any of that in science. You don't really learn any of it in high school. And so that got me excited. But that year I got into medical school, right? And that's the golden ticket everyone's waiting for as they think about medicine. And so off to medical school I went. But I guess over that time, the business mind was still kind of ticking at times.
So Wing calls that the white coat, black suit mentality, right? You wear the white coat when you're in your clinical work and the black business suit when you're managing your finances or your practice. So yeah, keep going.
Totally. So like, I think originally I was always believing that I would kind of wear that black coat, I guess, like in my own personal finances, thinking about the ways that I'll eventually run a corporation through my medical practice or something like that. But what I started to notice is just the lack of any financial topics, discussion, or education at medical school. And then I realized I have friends around me that didn't necessarily have that same mind. And I said, well, why don't we start talking about this stuff more? Why is this something that's never spoken of? The preceptors we work with don't really talk about it. And sure, it maybe doesn't apply to us immediately as a 1st-year medical student, but eventually it will. So when will this part of our education come into play? And I speak to people higher up than me. It doesn't really seem like it's ever happening. And then I said, well, between studying and doing other things, I kind of like finance and I probably know enough that I can make a few Instagram posts. So I start Budget Your MD is the name that I call it, right? and start to make little infographic posts and see how it goes. And at that time, it's still slow growing and students are slowly finding out about it. But what I find is as I go through each year of medical school, I'm able to see the questions and topics and interests that students would have at that time. Like, I'll give an example. In first year, it's the line of credit. Like, what does that mean? I all of a sudden have been given $350,000 from a bank. What does that look like for me as a medical student? How does interest even work? And, which bank offers the best package? And so that's kind of what I've used as an area to at least keep people interested on things that they're currently going through. And as now I go into fourth year, I realize disability insurance, questions like that, things that come up that are these decisions that require a little bit of financial savviness to understand are being put on people's plates, right?
I love that. So, what are some of the big issues and let's go a little bit beyond medical students to,
Totally.
residents, to fellows, people in early year practice. What are some of the struggles that people face in these early years? Because I think the big one for medical students is blowing through that line of credit, right? I remember, and when I went through, it was ultra low interest rates following the financial crisis, right? And so it was like, oh, wasn't that bad? But interest rates have gone up massively, right? Yeah. And so we have learners that are struggling with the thought of this interest piling up, but we also have a lot of physicians who have personal lines of credit used for consumer purchases. And it went from being tolerable to being very painful. Because think of it this way, and this is just a little thing, and then we'll get back to the interview. But if you have a personal line of credit that you used for whatever home renovations or consumer purchases, whatever it is, and that line of credit is $1,000 a month to service, it's like $2,000 having earned, because you have to pay personal tax on the money that you're going to use to service your line of credit. So that's a really big hit. That's like working, a whole long, busy clinic day at a minimum just to service that line of credit without even paying down the balance, right? So people are starting to feel the pinch of interest rates. But let's go back a little ways and just talk to me about what are some of the issues that you see in, people that are now going through residency, although there's a little bit of income coming in, but there's a little bit of tax planning that has to start to begin. And also like in those early years of practice.
Yeah. This actually reminds me of, I spoke with, I think it was the residents of Doctors of BC, one of their, whether it was the president or not, and he showed me a presentation at one point about the debt levels that residents have when they start residency. This might just be BC specific, and when they end. And my thought had always been, well, it would go down, right? Like they finally start.
Yeah.
Like you should be able to kind of work it down a little bit. 50% of it goes up. Of the students, 50% of residents will have more debt when they finish residency. And so things that me and you have always talked about, but like, let's think, it's got to be something rather than actually needing the fancy car or needing something. It's a mindset potentially that's causing people to do this. Now, we always have to like put in disclaimers. There's family circumstances, things that are out of
I mean, when you're like in my household, when we were both going through medical school, we paid the nanny more than I made.
100%.
Because we were both working like 80 hours a week and we had young kids, and she was hitting overtime by Wednesday afternoons. So yeah, you're right. There are family circumstances, totally. Yeah. And personal circumstances.
There's potentially a mindset, right? And I have this funny little line that I heard from a physician at one point. And it goes, if you spend like a doctor when you're a student, you'll live like a student when you're a doctor.
Ooh,
and that one hit me right away, right? Because it's that thought that if you blow up the line of credit through medical school and you finally get into practice and you think that pearly white income that you'll eventually earn will pay it all off, you start to realize that all that spending you did as a student basically wrecks any of the beauty of having a higher income, I guess, as a doctor eventually.
And there's a huge tax penalty now, right? Like that's the other reflection I have, in your generation compared to mine. Like, I mean, and it was even better years ago, but when I graduated like 15 some years ago and have been 10 years in practice. Oh yeah. So what am I'm totally getting my numbers wrong. I've been 10 years in practice, but like I was, at a place where like we could pay down the line of credit relatively easy with income splitting through the PC and dividends to spouse. Personal tax rates were lower. And now it's different. And the cost of living has gone up, right? So your base cost for food, clothing, shelter, transportation has gone up. So there's less and less margin to pay off personal debt, right? Mm-hmm. Between taxes and the cost of living. And you're right. It's so critical to get this right in the early years of practice.
Yeah. And I feel like what we're talking about here is just, it's personal financial management. Like there's personal finance, then there's like your corporation management and all that financial things that like we could all learn as doctors, but it's the personal side, the personal financial management that's so important, that could begin right as they get into medical school, as they go through medical school, into residency, and then into practice. That is honestly the saving grace, it appears like these days, to save you from some of the hardships of feeling like you have to go to clinic every single day or work the extra call shift to pay for all the luxuries that have kind of built up over time, right? And so that's what I think of as like the end game, in a sense, when I see myself and I see the students around me, of thinking about what do the decisions that we make right now as students, and kind of the habits, in a sense too, that we make right now as students, and the expectations that we make about what it'll be like when we start to make money, how that will actually impact our career, and how we can still be as healthy as possible as doctors in not only our lives as physicians serving our patients, but also in our financial lives, right?
I couldn't agree more. And it's so important to get that alignment right between what are your career goals and your personal goals, right? Because if you say, I want to be healthy, I don't want to work an excessive number of hours, I want to minimize the number of call or night shifts I'm doing or whatever, or clinic days I'm doing in a month, well, you have to have financial goals that align with that. Because if you don't, well, your mortgage company doesn't care, how many hours you want to work in a week. That mortgage comes due every month, right? Or the grocery bill or whatever else you're facing. And so it's being holistic in our lives and looking across and seeing, okay, well, what do I really want? And then what financial decisions am I making that align with it? Especially the big ones, right? Like mortgages and those kinds of things, like the big permanent purchases.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I think it ties into, we are offered this $350,000 when we've never had money before. There's like that aspect of like quickly your life changing in the financial world. But then I assume, I'm still like early in the game, but I assume the moment I start making an income that is substantial enough, the bank's going to come to me and say, hey, here's this fancy mortgage, you can have it and buy the $1 million house. And they make you feel like you can afford it, because in a sense, if you're willing to sell your life, you can, right? And it's those trip falls, or like the traps, that I think are just so important to be educated on as we're going through, to be aware and know the implications, right?
And this is also another thing that we teach this at the conference, and I alluded to this, when you were there as well, Christian, is the notion of an hourly rate. Every one of us has an hourly rate, what we're worth per hour, what we can bill. Remember that there's a tax penalty associated with that, right? So if you're billing $300 an hour, your after-tax income on that is actually going to be substantially less. So when you say, how many thousands of dollars do I have to pay in a mortgage every month, and property taxes and utilities and maintenance and repairs and vehicle payments, well, now you can actually calculate, and I'm happy to show anyone that's interested, how many hours in a month you're going to have to work just to maintain those big expenditures, right? And then how many hours are left for fun? And the bigger one is how many hours are left to save for retirement, which again, the sooner we start, the sooner we are better off. But if we're struggling for 5 or 10 years to pay off a line of credit, then we've already really, really shortened the compound growth curve, which is so vitally important not to do.
Yeah. And something that is underrated and not maybe spoken about as much is student loans nowadays. Like the government has announced that they're not charging interest on those. So we already have it easier than the previous, the generations before us, right? Like my student loans right now, if things don't change, I don't pay interest on it ever. Like I just have to make the minimum payment and it doesn't go up over time. Like that is a huge advantage.
That's a good deal.
I know. Yeah. Pretty sweet. Yeah. Almost say thanks to the guys over the line that did it first. And then Canada felt like they had to to follow suit. But like, yeah, it's the only interest-bearing debt that we're going to have coming out of is the line of credit. And you have to jump into that a little bit to pay tuition. The student loans never cover it fully, but it is still a variable cost in my mind of kind of your lifestyle and things like that really push that number up.
It totally. And I mean, I'm sympathetic to it as well. I mean,
totally.
When you consider, broader, sort of North American or Canadian society, there are very few people that are forced to delay gratification the way doctors are.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of us go a decade or longer in school. In fact, it's actually much longer. Some of us regularly go like 15 years from undergrad to practice, right? That is a very long road, right? And it's natural to want the nice things in life.
Yeah.
Right. You actually do deserve them, right? The message here isn't, that you've got to live this extremely austere existence, that it's Kraft dinner and ramen noodles every night. No, there's just got to be some balance.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a very real cost to that lifestyle creep. And remembering that if we're 10 years behind the average adult in entering practice and earning in our prime, it's also 10 years that we've lost on the compound growth curve. Again, it's another big impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've used the example sometimes with students as we kind of talk about our debt of what would it look like if you just became a red seal electrician right off the bat?
Yeah.
And you saved 15% of your income over time. The amount of time it would take us as physicians who are thought to have make so much more money than a red seal electrician to catch up to that person is incredible. I don't know the math in my mind. I'm not that much of a whiz, but like it would take so long to catch up to that person for the compounding that they would achieve over those years that we're studying.
Yeah.
And yeah, it blows my mind sometimes, but that's just only solidifies the point of just good, sound, basic financial knowledge, just for basic, like, your own finances, things like that, just to understand.
And the other reflection is, again, another observation about younger generations coming through. They don't want to work the 70, 80-hour work weeks that older generations of physicians have worked. And I actually think that's a wonderful thing. I think that's an example to the entire profession, that we should all be working fewer hours. The job is stressful. We deal in people's lives, and more duty should be spread across a larger group of physicians. Absolutely, right? Yeah. It shouldn't be 2 rural physicians holding up a town, in a remote part of Canada. It should be 4. Do you know what I mean? And this applies everywhere across our healthcare system. But again, if we're going to cut back those hours, our finances have to align with that broader goal. And so it's about like being mindful and intentional and reflecting on what do we really want our ideal work week to look like. Because yours was actually very interesting. I really liked yours. You don't have to share it, but it was great. It was really balanced.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. Like my dream in the future, I think first and foremost for myself, like this is getting a little bit more personal into how I feel. Like, I'm like a family man first. I've always been that way. Like my dream is to be able to go to my daughter's
I love it. Trust me. Do it all.
Game. Like that's
wonderful.
I want to be able to
miss any of those moments.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I want to be able to drive my son and his buddies to the basketball game and hear them get hyped up to some Eminem or something on the way to the game. Like I want to be there for those moments, right? And so I think like if I could work clinic 2-3 days a week and then have 2 or 3 days a week that are more flexible, that they could be, those moments with my kids, or be moments where I'm getting to pursue Budget Your MD and kind of push those things forward.
Passion.
Yeah, exactly. That gives me the balance, right? That allows me to really, really be the doctor I want to be on those 2 to 3 days, and then be the dad I want to be, hopefully, be the husband I want to be, and then still kind of use that other part of my brain that sometimes has to be shut off at times, right?
I absolutely love it. What an inspiring message. So, okay, let's tell us a little bit more about Budget MD. We touched on it, and then we went on all these tangents.
Yeah. Exactly.
Tell me a little bit more. Like, what do you do?
Okay.
Right now with it.
So the thing that I would say we provide, or we provide the most value on, is something I call the debt projection tool, and it kind of honestly centers around everything we've talked about today. And I made it originally for myself. I was just interested. Okay, if I have this much debt currently, and say I want to go into family practice, which is what I want to go into, or what if I want to do internal med or ER? What would those differing incomes look like in terms of eventually being able to pay off my line of credits, my student loans, like how long would it take me to get to financial independence? And if I want to save a little bit along the way. And so I took some Excel courses through my business degree and know 3 or 4 formulas. So it's not the cleanest Excel spreadsheet in the world, but it works. And what I allow myself to do is to plug in, okay, this is my age. This is the specialty I might think of doing. And I even have like the house I may want to buy at some age.
Oh, wow.
And the interest rate that approximately could be at that time, and the down payment I could approximately have. And I even have in there how many kids I would want to have. And I just do an average. I think it's like just under $14,000 a year for a kid from the age of like 0 to 18. I've never been a parent before, so I have no idea. That's what I found on the internet, right? So maybe it skews a little bit more expensive into the later years as you're paying for universities and stuff, if that's something you want to do versus the beginning. But you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But basically, the goal of this tool is to help what I find to be 2 groups of students. And this is what I get passionate about. There's students that are super worried about their finances. Like I've met a few that like, oh, I have so much debt, I'm never going to be able to pay it off.
That was me.
It's hurting their ability to learn. And I'm like, you're going to be fine. Like you actually need to be told that like you're doing a great job and like be able to move on with just learning and know that things are going to be okay. That's one group. And then the other group is oh, I'm going to be a doctor one day. It's completely fine. Yeah. I do DoorDash every single night because like, we'll make a good income at some point and pay it off. And so it's those 2 groups that fill out this debt projection that I have and kind of give their example scenarios. And I can show them, well, okay, person A that's worried about their life, you're going to be okay. You're like, this is kind of your projection approximately, like none of this is exact, but it gives them an idea that the debt will eventually get paid off and kind of eases some of their worries. Group 2 sees on their projection that with their current debt and spending, the curve only just continues to go up. It's almost like you're not going to be able to pay all of this off. And coincidentally, they're the people that say they want to buy a $3 million house, and then that mortgage payment really causes the curve to continue up as well. But my goal with that is to just start the conversation, right? Is to get that part of get the light switch moment to go and realize that, okay, the current habits and mindset I have are maybe a little bit off from what I need to currently be doing to make sure I'm setting myself up to succeed not only as a physician, but in my own independent financial life.
I love it.
So that's my big, that's the one I really have fun with because I kind of like Excel, and they send over the projection. I do it completely for free and I send it to them. And then I offer them 30 minutes to chat about it too, if they want to. And so that's been super fun. It's kind of an extra thing I'll do in the mornings or the evenings. I'll fill those out for people. It's not AI generated at all at this point. So I'm still clunking some things together on my own computer, but I'm one of those rare breeds that likes to see an Excel spreadsheet. So
yeah, I love it. So where do you want to go with it? Right? Because obviously we're going to hear more about it. You're in the early stages. Where do you want to go with it? Like, what's your dream in terms of the profession?
Yeah. So my dream in terms of the profession would be to almost not solve, but help in the world of, you're going to get my mind going too fast here, Kevin, when you ask me about my dreams for this thing. It's just so, right?
I just did a podcast episode on dreams. It'll come out. It'll have come out before this one. I'm a very big believer in being open about our dreams. So talk about yours. Go.
Yeah. So a broad dream would be to change the way that financial education is brought into the medical programs across Canada. Let's start Canada first. We don't need to go worldwide. I don't need to dream that big.
Okay.
Yet. Okay. But if we could somehow incorporate financial education into the undergraduate medical degree, and whether that just be evenings or a lunchtime money talk or something, to not only help students become aware of the pitfalls as they transition into residency and practice, but also just to be aware of kind of the habits that we've been speaking to a lot over the past, I don't know how long.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's the number one goal, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, I hope that could evolve into a better community in medicine that is willing, and I think physician empowerment is already absolutely spearheading this, but a community where doctors feel more safe to talk about this stuff, right? Like it's rare. Like as a student, have I ever had a preceptor bring up, billing or how their like clinic runs and stuff like that? No, I haven't. And if there could be a community where students can ask about this stuff, where people further down the line can give advice about these are some of the mistakes I made as a student. And that doesn't have to be like physician to student. That can be, 20-year experienced physician to first 5 years practicing physician. Just a space like that would be awesome. Just to provide that advice and care almost for the future generation of physicians. And I think in general, the dream, like macro of all of that, is that could then in some way help aid like the issues that we see in medicine as a whole right now, like the burnout issues. Like that's the big word.
Without question.
Like, I mean, and I think me and you align on this, that like if personal finance can be focused on more and physicians understand how that binds them, I think we could hopefully turn the dial a little down on the burnout rates. And that's the goal, right? Like that's the hot word these days in medicine, practicing physicians, is burnout, right?
Yeah, I'll just go on. I'll go climb on my, pedestal on this one and go. But when like I teach wellness, right? That's one of the things we teach at Physician Empowerment, and I've done CME events for it. And I'm going to be blunt. I mean, you can do all of the mandated wellness modules online that the system tells you to do. You can do yoga, you can journal, you can meditate. I do all of those things. You can do all of that. But if you are unhealthy, working 70 hours a week, no amount of extra stuff you do is going to make that better. If your healthy number of hours a week is 40, then you just have to come down. The only way to come down is to be financially secure. Financial security underpins all wellness in our profession, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. The other big one, and we sort of touched on this before we started recording, was leadership. When we want to transform the system and make it better for our patients, better for us, better for our allied health colleagues, we need to be involved. We need to be able to sit on those committees. We need to advocate. We need to be a voice. We need to be present, truly present. That will only happen when we're cutting down on the 70-hour work weeks and we have a little bit more balance to get involved. Mm-hmm. I, again, truly believe that. And again, that is underpinned by financial security.
Yeah. And, it almost feels odd as a student right now talking to a physician who's current practicing to like speak about this financial stuff, because it almost feels weird, to be honest. Like we're doctors. And I think at the conference, Wing spoke about this, about where there's this altruistic mindset that's kind of ingrained in us, that we're supposed to just work like crazy and not think about the finances because we're serving. And I 100% like have that heart to serve. But I think it's gotten to a point these days where like you have to start to think about that weird financial pit in your stomach, because it has all these implications we've been speaking to, right?
You will do your best care when you are not burnt out, when you are not exhausted, and when you're not overbooked and worrying about the overhead.
Yeah,
that is what your patients deserve.
Yeah.
A rested physician who is in control of her or his schedule. That's what's so powerful. Mm-hmm. And that's what will lead to better patient care. So to serve, it means to serve ourselves first, or to be our healthiest first, is in my opinion.
Yeah. And like, honestly, Kevin, I appreciate you saying all of that, because I think some of the mindsets I've come to, I would never be able to come to just as a fourth year medical student, learning on the pathophysiology.
It's hard to talk.
Yeah, it is. And like, there's no medical student out there that's thinking about these things. We only hear of it from people like you and Wing and all these other physicians that are starting to talk about this stuff, that we can begin to create some of these ideas of important topics and frameworks that will matter later down the road. But what's so awesome about this conversation is that hearing them then allows you to have the advantage of applying them early. I think that's the key that I get excited about, because talking about them, 10 years into practice is awesome and super important, has a role, but there's such an advantage to thinking about it early.
I couldn't agree more.
Because you're making lifetime decisions.
Yeah.
Even the specialty you go into, like that's bigger than the house you end up buying. The house you end up buying is high up there too, but the specialty you end up choosing, like think about this stuff. Like that's your life. Like you're signing we're all in medicine to.
It's very hard to retrain.
Finding away your life to go do that. Like, be ready. You know what I mean?
Very hard to retrain. I'm envious of our nursing colleagues who are able to cycle through different aspects of nursing over the course of their career in healthcare, because we really struggle with that in medicine. It's very hard to retrain, and understandably so. I mean, that there has to be a lot of technical proficiency. So I thought this was absolutely amazing. I would encourage listeners to check out Budget Your MD. I know more is coming from you, Christian. That's why we want to bring you on the show, because this is going to be a lot more than just medical students and residents, right? Because I think all of us should be going through this exercise. So get building those spreadsheets. No, I'm just bugging you. No, we look forward to the other offerings that are coming. And you do so much education as well, I know, over Instagram and other places. So I again encourage people to check it out, because what you teach is so true, and it's been great connecting and great having you on the show. So we'll definitely have you on again.
Yeah, I appreciate your mentorship. Thanks for having me on. It's been so good to chat about some of these things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to the Physician Empowerment Podcast. If you're ready to take those next steps in transforming your practice, finances, or personal well-being, then come and join us at physempowerment.ca, PHYS empowerment.ca, to learn more about how we can help. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would share our podcast with a colleague or friend, and head over to Apple Podcasts to give us a 5-star rating and review. If you've got feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episode topics, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to join us and be interviewed and share some of your story, we'd absolutely love that as well. Please send me an email at kmailo@physempowerment.ca. Thank you again for listening.